So to this point, we've done 3/4 recipes, and we've also tested them and shown you what the bubbles look like and all of the things, talked about the chemistry, the importance of solvents, what we're actually creating with a whipped sugar soap scrub, all the things. Today, we are going to focus on troubleshooting your whipped sugar soap scrubs, both in paste form for the melting version, as well as in the thick of it when you're already mixing and it's not doing what you want. I will talk more about that in just a minute, but before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things, and you are here for day 351 of 365 days of soap. And today, as I said, the next part in this playlist for whipped sugar soap scrubs is troubleshooting your recipes, both before you do the melt, so you notice that there was something wrong with a whipped soap that you would like to change for the next round, or when you're in the thick of it. So we're going to do it in two different ways, and we are going to also correct some misinformation that I saw on the Saponification Nation thread about, what glycerin is used for versus all the things in this. And so let's get to the video, and we can talk about all of that, there. Okay, so we are back for day 351, and we are going to be troubleshooting the whipped sugar soap scrubs. And I know, I was supposed to actually have this up yesterday, along with the next one in the series, but I actually loaded this entire thing up without any audio, and noticed it yesterday and couldn't do anything about it because I was away from my computer, doing my real job, which is running my business, and not this. So here we are. So from the first, what you can do, obviously, if you've noticed that your recipe is too thin, you can change it at the melt stage. And now I'm changing it by cutting the water in half. So 7 ounces of paste, 3.5 ounces of water instead of, the regular 6 or 7 ounces. Keeping the glycerin the same at 6 ounces and increasing the stearic just a little bit from 2.8 ounces to 3. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, to troubleshoot this from the melt stage, is because on that post on Saponification Nation, a lot of people were sort of, spitballing and theorizing and trying to figure out why something might be too thin for Rachel with her original post. And there was a conversation that was had about the glycerin. The glycerin is totally what's doing it, right? That's not the case, and actually playing with the glycerin too much in something like this can lead to some problems down the road. Now, the reason why you need a fair amount of glycerin, and you really should not be decreasing it too much, is because it acts as the solvent, much like it would in a melt and pour base that you are making from scratch. Now, what does that mean? What do the solvents do? Well, the solvents effectively, they interrupt the chemical compounds that are created with your soaps, right? So the structure of your soap with its nice little crystalline structure and all that jazz, they're very tightly bound. And we can see that in play when we look at the solvents in play, when we look at a clear melt and pour soap. Now we have all of these soap molecules that are very, very tightly connected. the glycerin spreads those out. So you're still getting your crystalline structure, you're still getting that occurring, but it's spread out in such a way that you can then see through it. So that's how you can see it in play during a 100% clear melt and pour soap recipe. In this, it's acting much the same in that it's spreading it out, but because it's spreading it out, it is allowing the soap to be manipulated in ways that regular cold process soap would otherwise not be manipulated. So in this case, whipping it up and creating a stable whip that stays that way, all light and fluffy. Now, samesies with this, I am obviously going to be whipping this very, very cool, as we should do with all of our whipped sugar soap scrubs. If you want a big, beautiful, fluffy, end product. But yes, reducing the glycerin is going to actually mean that all of those structures within the soap molecules, are tightly bound or more tightly bound than you would otherwise want them to. This will lead to a batch of soap that is not going to whip up and stay whipped, if it even whips up at all. So playing with the glycerin or removing the glycerin is definitely not going to be the way to do your troubleshooting if you're looking at a recipe or a whip that is thinner than you would like. And look at me go, dancing here. I'm having a great time. Cool. Love to see it. But yes, so if you are wanting to have a thicker batch of soap, again, start with reducing the water and maybe increasing the stearic. Now, the stearic in this instance is going to act as a co-emulsifier in general is what stearic acid is, but this is also going to act as a form of a thickener for sure. So if you're finding that your whip is a little bit too runny, as I said, decrease the water, increase the stearic a bit. Try it with a little bit with the stearic acid, because if you end up putting too much in, you're going to end up with an overly thick batch that you will not be able to pipe. And I know how many people love piping their whipped sugar soap scrubs. So yeah, keep that in mind. I am just randomly coloring this particular batch with insert some orange here, because these are not batches that I am going to be selling and doing anything with. These are literally all just the test batches. So I put in, the mic is there, and just didn't pay attention to how much I was putting in. Just, I need it to be orange so we can tell the difference between the two, both for testing later, but for right now, so we know that we're working with two different batches. This particular paste that I'm using is the exact same paste that we have been using from the original recipe, with the olive and the coconut and the mango butter and the castor, because we're keeping it all as samesies as we possibly can, because science. So that was also me putting in the preservative. Again, you use your preservative at the appropriate preservative amounts for the ones that you are selecting. So in this case, I believe I used Germabin. I'm not sure, but you do want a broad spectrum preservative that is going to work equally well in a oil and water-based solution, because this is kind of both. And so it's good to keep that in mind and make sure you are using the correct preservative for this. And you would then calculate that at this stage, what it weighs here. So the soap paste plus the water plus the glycerin plus the stearic acid. The sugar is not included in those ratios for your preservative, because that's not part of this particular thing. It's one of the very few things where you don't actually, base the preservative on the total batch weight of something. But the sugar is kind of an arbitrary thing for all of this, because you can add a little bit of sugar, a lot of sugar, or none sugar whatsoever. The stuff that has the water in it is the part that you're going to want to preserve. And that's going to be, the stuff that's in there before you put in the sugar. Yes. So as you can see, this is a nice thick batch of soap. Everything has been great with the whip. No problems whatsoever. Another way to do this, if you did not decrease the water from the very beginning, and you would use, say, my regular batch, and maybe you whipped it too cold, or too warm, rather, or maybe you over whipped it. Or maybe you did none of those things. You just want a different consistency than what my original recipe is, which is totally fine. I can get behind that. You can also change things here within the whip, which we are going to talk about in the next section of all of this, because I want to show you, how to do that with a different batch of soap. Because if this one is not thin, then what are you going to see? You get it. But anyway, that's going to be the best way to really troubleshoot an overly thin, batch of whipped sugar soap scrubs. A way to troubleshoot something that is overly thick would be to add more water. Now, you are going to run into getting overly thick batches of whipped sugar soap scrubs from a soap paste when you are dealing with soaps that are very, very high in, your unsaturated fats, rather, and also very, very solid oils and butters. And so you run the risk of that for sure. And so one of the ways to make sure that you don't get an overly thick batch of soap is to increase the water amount in the melting stage. Now, if you have an overly thick batch of soap in the whipping stage, you can also adjust that and fix that on the fly too, which we're going to talk about, obviously in the next part. But I want to show you, again, my lack of piping skills, because it's become a nice running joke, really, at this point. But again, you guys love doing your TikToks and your Instagrams with, hey, look at my whipped soap all prettily piped. And I get it. It's pretty. I am not good at this stuff, though. Still working with those flower tip things, but they're cute. Isn't that cute? Hey, I did that thing. I also zoomed in a whole lot on that one because my head was all up in that shot. And there's probably going to be instances in this where my head is in the shot and I'm just not going to remove it because it's all a thing, really. But hey, look at that. I can one hand pipe that. Isn't that awesome? Yeah, no, I did it. I did the thing. It's pretty. Look at all those. It's a lot. It's so many whipped sugar soap scrubs there. I've got so many just hanging about. Oh yeah, look, see, there's my head. But look how pretty that is. Yes, that's gorgeous. Beautifully pipeable, for sure. Best, easiest way to make sure that you don't end up with an overly thin batch is to play with the water during the melt stage. But let's talk about what happens during the whip stage. Okay, now round 2 is going to be something different. So this is the base from the original recipe using the exact same oil and water. Well, the exact same soap paste, and also the water is at its original percentage and amount, so like 7 ounces. And the glycerin stays the same, stearic acid back down to 2.8. And we are going to fix this on the fly. I just dumped all that sugar in there. I'm mixing it up. It's still cold. Still whipping it cold. I'm not over whipping it. Don't ever over whip it. But I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, maybe it's too thin. Maybe I don't like it. What do I do for this to make it less thin? Well, what you're going to do in this situation when you're in the middle of all of this and you're like, oh, it's too soupy, you can trust the process, or if you want to thicken it up, you can do something at this stage. You can actually do a few things at this stage. And this is true whether you have soaped it or you have whipped it too cold or too hot, rather, or whether you have over whipped it. The over whipping, you're only going to get so much out of this first way, though, more sugar. As far as adding the volume back and all the beautiful, airiness that is a whipped sugar soap scrub, you're not going to get a lot of volume back out of that if you over whip it. But if you have mixed it too cold, adding more sugar and just hand stirring it in will work wonders. You can absolutely do that. Because remember, there's no hard, fast rule on how much sugar you put into this, realistically. I tend to do it, I think at about 80%, but you can go more. You can go twice that amount. It doesn't super matter. You can add some more sugar. It will thicken it up. A better option is to add a thickener. Now, Not only will this help with thickening the product up and making it less soupy, sure, it will also help with the bringing the volume back from the whip, depending on what thickener you use. This particular thickener that I put in to the size of recipe that I've been giving you is meringue powder. Now, this is a vegan meringue powder that is actually weirdly made from meringues that have been finely ground. Super wild. And I love this. I use this in absolutely everything. Now, if it's not a vegan meringue powder, right, and so it has eggs in it, I do get a lot of questions on that. Do I need to add a preservative? Will it rot because eggs? One, no, because of the way that the meringue powder is created. Two, yeah, add a preservative to your whipped sugar soap scrubs anyway. So regardless, just add it. There's that. But I added in, I think, a tablespoon of the meringue powder, and look what that did. Did wonders. It's all nice and thick and beautiful again. So now I'm going to color this a different color, just randomly, so we know the difference between the two for all of this, and then do its pipey pipe thing, and then we'll go ahead and test everything, obviously. But as far as other thickeners, if you don't want to use a meringue powder, vegan or otherwise, what else can you use? Well, you can use tapioca. That's also a thickener. Tapioca starch, powder, flour. You get it. You can also use arrowroot powder, for sure. That is also a great thickener. You can also use cornstarch. Cornstarch can tend to make things deflate a little bit, though. It gets a little heavy. Arrowroot and tapioca and meringue do not. And the tapioca and the meringue will also lend to the adding of the volume back in case you have over whipped. Something else that you can use to some degree of success is cream of tartar, but cream of tartar can be a little bit finicky to work with in this because it can harden it too much, and then you're left with completely unpipeable stuff. But that is not unpipeable at all, and it's delightful. And the longer that meringue is in, the more fluffy that the entire thing gets because it's looking for all of the water in the batch to absorb. Okay, now on to the tests of both of these guys, and first up will be the orange one. So the first one that I did by modifying the actual soap base recipe by reducing the amount of water. And it's delightful. Look at all those grains. It's nice and sugary. Definitely scrubby. Ask my arms how scrubby these things have all been. It's been wild. And, you know, you're getting your nice cleansing, beautiful, moisturizing lather throughout all of that as well, which is also delightful. And yeah, there it is. It works. Now, with the back to the meringues and the thickeners or whatever, reasonably you can use anything that you usually use to like cook with to thicken your stuff in the kitchen. You can also use that to thicken the whipped sugar soap scrubs, i.e. meringue powder, which is commonly used actually in like royal icing and stuff in baking to thicken your, you know, frosting, your icing, which is one of the reasons why I decided to use it for this application, because if this is not a frosting-esque, you know, activity in the soap shop, I don't know what is, honestly. So you can use realistically anything. Using flour, I think, is a terrible idea because I do actually use flour as a thickener in my, you know, like white gravy recipes in, you know, cooking. I don't know that that's the best idea for soap because a lot of people are trying to avoid gluten, right? And so it's just easier to stay as gluten-free as you possibly can in all of this. Also, flour is very, very heavy. And while it will work to thicken-ish, typically flour works to thicken by binding with fats. And so that gets a little bit weird. But anything else is pretty well fair game. Meringue, arrowroot, cream of tartar, tapioca, cornstarch, all of those things totally work. And it will give you a beautiful, pipeable consistency that stays up on itself. Look how gorgeous all of that is. It's not solidifying. It's not settling into sad little whatevers. You've got your beautiful piped consistency there. and a delightful whipped sugar soap scrub just waiting to be, videoed for your TikToks and your Instagrams and all the things. And then, sold and sent to your customers, because that's important too. And also, the addition of the meringue also keeps it more stable for shipping, which is also fun. So, best pro tip ever. Put some meringue in if it's too thin. Yeah, love it. Anyway, that is the troubleshooting. And there it is, a whipped sugar soap scrub done 2 ways, and 2 really easy, reasonable ways of how to fix it. Again, both in the beginning stages, because maybe you want it to be thicker, but also within the actual mixing of the thing if you need to fix something on the fly. For the beginning stages, yes, obviously decreasing the water will help. It's not all about necessarily your solid oils, right? Because like the 100% coconut oil soap that we did, for example, there was nothing wrong with that. That consistency was completely perfect and was not overly thick. And coconut oil is a solid oil. And then with the tallow one, it was super duper thick, and it had, some liquid oils in the recipe. So the paste itself is actually less important than the way you sort of manipulate it. And decreasing the water will help a lot. Decreasing the glycerin, I don't ever recommend. The glycerin is super needed as the solvent to create essentially the elongating of your crystalline structure within the cold process soap that you have already created. So definitely don't skimp on the glycerin. And then for fixing it, in the actual making of it, if you're noticing that it's too thin or it's thinner than you would like, and you are whipping it cool and you haven't over whipped it, and it's still not that consistency and you want it to be thicker, yeah, add a thickener. I love meringue powder. Personally, the meringue powder that I use is vegan, so it's actually created from grinding down meringues. So that's fun, but vegan meringues. And essentially what that meringue powder is doing and all of that is that it's finding the water, the extra liquidity, and it's soaking it up. You can use any number of thickeners, though. It doesn't have to be meringue. It can be tapioca. It can be arrowroot. It can be cornstarch. Really, I prefer meringue because I think that it gives a more whippy, fun consistency, but I don't really have anything to back that up except meringues are fun and whippy and light and airy, and that's it. I've tried it with all different thickeners, and the results are reasonably the same throughout all of them, for sure. Conversely, if your whipped sugar soap scrub is too thick and you want to thin it down, as I showed you in the tallow video, adding more oil is not going to loosen that up in any meaningful way. What you really should be adding if it's too thick is glycerin, because it's breaking down the crystalline structure of the cold processed soap that's making it thick and pulling it apart. Now, with all of this, we have not talked a whole lot about preservatives in the videos leading up to this, so I hope that I answered enough questions with the preservatives for this. But just in case, if there's anything that I feel I might have missed within the preservative conversation with all of this, because I'm not really focusing on preserving the soaps so much as just getting your recipes and your needs dialed in, I will talk about them in the next 2 videos. Speaking of the next 2 videos, the next video in the series is going to be turning any whipped sugar soap scrub into a foaming whipped sugar soap scrub without doing the 100% surfactant recipe that I showed you before. So definitely stick around for that, for sure. For my sudsers, hey, thank you for sticking around for everything. You guys are amazing. I appreciate you each and every day. I hope you guys have been having fun with this playlist. I had a lot of fun making all of these things. It's been a little crazy because there have been a lot of different products that I know that I'm never going to use. And so it's like, literally, what am I going to do with all this whipped sugar soap scrub? That was just for a testing thing. So I appreciate that you guys appreciate that I am, doing the work and wasting my materials really to show you and help you on your soapy journey. And I hope it has been helpful. For the Discord sudsers, obviously, if you still have questions, put them here or put them in the Discord, and I will update the channel that has all of the whipped sugar soap scrubs accordingly. Yes. But I'm out of here. I will see you guys in the next installation of all of this, where we turn any whipped sugar soap scrub into a foaming whipped sugar soap scrub. So I look forward to that. Again, thank you for being here. I will be back soon for another round of soapy fun. Bye.